Good day. Welcome to our webinar today, Career Pathways, Leadership Development, Conversations with Alumni. We're so excited about this opportunity to talk about the Career Pathways program here at the Council, and I'm joined with two very special guests that are going to share their experiences with us today. Before we get started, I'd like to just give a little bit of background about Career Pathways and what it is. This program began in 2010 at the Council in a 3-year pilot. The Pathways program is a highly selective pipeline expansion program. It's a year-long leadership preparation program, and it's open to individuals from diverse backgrounds who are currently employed in foundations and grant-making institutions, as well as those outside the field of philanthropy. We have cohorts that are comprised of 24 individuals that come from various backgrounds within foundations that are just looking to prepare themselves as candidates for philanthropic leadership positions. Pathways is open for mid to senior level career professionals, and it was developed in response to the field's growing commitment to advancing inclusive practices and diversity in philanthropic decision making. Through our council research, we did a research back in 2009, which is in our Pathways to Philanthropic Leadership Baseline Report. And we learned many demographics about the field at that time, which really set the stage for Pathways and created the genesis for this program. So I'm very excited to talk to you about Career Pathways and to welcome my guests here today. So for the sake of our conversation, I wanted to be clear around what our objectives are and what we're hoping to accomplish. We're going to learn more about the graduates of this program, why they chose to apply to Career Pathways, what were some of the expectations that they had going into this, and what did they expect this to be, and perhaps what did the experience turn out to be. We'll also talk about just their experience in general and were there any key takeaways, highlights of the program, any aha moments for them that really solidified who they were in their leadership journey. We want to talk about how it's influenced them in their career as well as their leadership. And then ultimately, really, what were the best pieces of this Career Pathways program and what did they learn most? And finally, we'll conclude with some frequently asked questions and any lingering thoughts that we may have about the program. So with that, my name is Karan Hardin. My role is Vice President of Professional Development here at the Council on Foundations, and I have the very unique pleasure of overseeing this Career Pathways program. And I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Latice Briggs, Dr. Briggs, and Praz Ranawera. So before we get started, I'd love for them to introduce themselves so that you can get a sense for who we'll be speaking with today. Latice?
Thank you, Karan. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Latice Briggs. I'm the Senior Director of the Center for Strategic Philanthropy at the Milken Institute. I've been at the Institute for about 7 years, and I'd like to still think I'm new to philanthropy, but I think at this point that's a lie. I'm a scientist by training, and I kind of fell into philanthropy in a good way. And so that's a little bit about me. Praz?
Thanks, Latice. Yeah, hi, my name is Praz Ranawera. I am a Senior Portfolio Manager on the K-12 team, which is part of the U.S. program at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I've been at the Gates Foundation just a little over 2 years. I'm actually a former teacher, and I worked in law enforcement for 7 years. I grew up in the UK, as you can tell from my accent, but I've lived in Switzerland and Japan. I've traveled a lot, and I kind of see myself as bringing an immigrant's perspective to the work that I do in education, and having experienced a bunch of education systems just outside of the US. So it's great to be with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you both for joining us. I'll also add that Latice and Praz are obviously both alumnus of the program. They both graduated from the Career Pathways program in 2017. So with that, I'd like to begin with just talking about why did you apply to the program. So Letice, I wonder if you could take us through what made you choose to apply to Career Pathways, especially given where you are in the organization. And then perhaps that may lead into what were you expecting from this program?
Absolutely. Um, so when I applied to the program, I think I was going into year 5 at the Institute, and I climbed the ladder pretty quickly within that 5-year time frame. But I had felt, and I had one more sort of rung to climb along the ladder to get to the position that I am now, which is senior director, which is the number 2 that oversees our center. And I'd been doing that job for a couple years and sort of was just sort of waiting to be tapped and acknowledged to say, hey, yes, okay, you've earned this title change. You've proven that you can do the job. Um, and so there were 2 things that I was really sort of looking for when I came across Career Pathways. One was help navigating that transition and sort of finding a different version of my voice. And I don't want to say finding my voice because it's not hard for me to find my voice, but sometimes there are like little nuances that are you can't quite pinpoint within yourself. And for me, that part of my voice around raising my hand to say, hey, I've been doing this job for 2 years. I've earned this. I've served as an interim executive director. I've earned this. So that was one reason why I applied to Career Pathways, because I felt like I needed help being able to say that to my leadership. The other thing that was happening, and actually on my journey through Career Pathways, I realized, which was the more significant thing that I was struggling with, was I had hit a wall with respect to setting career goals. So as I mentioned, I had one more goal to reach, and that was getting to senior director. And that was, when I say one more goal to reach, that was, my 5-year plan. So I was coming up on the end of my 5-year plan. And I'd worked so hard to check off all the mini goals, and I'm one of these people, I always have a 5-year plan. But I noticed that when I would do my performance check-ins with my executive director, my interim goals would be very seemingly mundane. They weren't exciting. And she actually was slightly concerned because she knows me very well. And she was just worried that I was getting bored, which I was bored. I just didn't want to say that I was bored. So, all of these things taken together, I realized that it wasn't until I actually saw the announcement for Career Pathways that I was actually in a little bit of trouble, because I was getting to this end of my 5-year plan, and my goals were becoming smaller and smaller and less exciting, and I didn't quite know how to reset the bar, if you will. And so my expectation going into the program, I think it was 2 things, sort of the general things that you get from professional development programs, networking, speaking, things like that. And then I think I was also really looking forward to being more steeped in philanthropy as a professional. So as a philanthropic advisor, sometimes, at least for me, I feel like for me, particularly being trained as a scientist and turned philanthropic advisor, it's sometimes a little bit of a lonely world because we're out here doing our thing, but we don't, and we interact with foundations and high net worths to help them build out their strategic plans for their philanthropy, but we don't necessarily interact and engage, holistically with other philanthropy professionals. And so that was the part that I was missing. What I actually got out of the program was the things that I expected, but a whole lot more. I was really surprised of how holistic the program is, and really just really giving us the tools to do that, to a different level of introspection, so that as you rise through the ranks, I should back up. Providing a forum to have a conversation to say, hey, once you get to a certain level in your career, the world kind of changes around you. The ways that you set goals, the way that you move, the way that you navigate certain situations is different. Going from managing to leading is a whole different thing. And so providing a forum to have that conversation, but also providing a safe space to do the level of introspective work that you need to do to really transcend and elevate yourself to where you want to go in your career. Pathways did an incredible job at that, and we can certainly talk more about it. And I want to give Praz an opportunity to share her experience.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. I definitely want to dig into a few things that you said. Praz, what about you? Can you talk about why you chose to apply for Pathways and what were some of your expectations going into this program?
Absolutely, yeah. So my story is a little different from Letitia's. When I applied to this program, I was really new to philanthropy, and I came in with some pretty strong experience as a leader in education, but I knew I had a steep learning curve around philanthropy in front of me. And I'd actually been a Broad resident, which is a residency program that's funded by the Eli and Edith Broad Center for Leaders in Urban Education. And I had a really great experience with that sort of fellowship experience. So I was looking for something similar in philanthropy. And the Council on Foundations is an organization that the Gates Foundation supports through our philanthropic partnerships team. And I have a lot of respect for the work that the council does. Vicky Sproul, who was the CEO at that time, was a woman that I'd heard a lot of great things about. She seemed to really understand the need for more diversity in philanthropy, and she was pretty vocal about it, which I really liked. And then, of course, like the program itself kind of offered a good opportunity to find some fellowship in this kind of struggle to bring greater diversity and equity and inclusion to philanthropy. And just sort of from a very personal perspective, you know, the Gates Foundation, which is headquartered in the Pacific Northwest, is still largely run by people whose personal experiences are very centered on the USA, people who are white and are relatively privileged. You know, even as our work is about reaching the poorest and least advantaged folks, who are primarily people of color, right, around the globe. And so, you know, at the foundation, we're super conscious of that, and we're on our own kind of DEI journey. But like on a day-to-day basis, I operate in this environment that is very privileged and still very white. And so for me, as a professional and a person of color, moving from the field of education into the work of philanthropy, like that network of peers of color from Career Pathways was very, very appealing. And then in addition to that, you know, I really just wanted and needed time to kind of explore my own leadership style and values. And when I looked at the programming for Career Pathways, I saw some stuff that was really exciting. And so kind of going into the program, my expectations were really around kind of like building strong relationships with my colleagues in the cohort. And that was really the main reason why I signed up for the program. And really like from the moment I first walked into the room at that first session in Miami, which was right after the presidential election in 2016. And I was like feeling super hurt and like a little confused. But then I was just blown away and just really like inspired by the caliber of people in that room. And it was a super diverse group in like every sense of the word, age, race, religion, gender, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation. It was just super diverse. And there were participants who were from large foundations, small community foundations, family foundations, philanthropic support organizations like Latisse. You name it, people came from all over the field. And some folks were just kind of one promotion away from being a CEO, and others were trying to be better program officers or better executives. And it was just a huge privilege to have access to all of that talent. So my expectations in joining the program around fellowship were I was definitely not let down as the fellowship moved forward.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. You know, one of the things that I heard from Latisse, and then I sort of heard indirectly from you, Praz, also was just this whole notion of how extremely holistic this program was, and how, you know, you even spoke to that just a second ago, thinking about that first session, which you came into, which was right on the heels, as you mentioned, of the presidential election in 2016. And Latisse talked about this holistic approach to the curriculum and the program. I wonder if, Latisse, we can start with you, if you could just dig in a little bit more and talk about the holistic experience and what that meant for you and how that really helped you in your leadership.
Yeah. So, you know, I think the the best example for me is always the circle. Um, and so to give the audience a little context, I am an introvert. And I don't prefer to be necessarily in close quarters or sitting in circles, open circles. And I'm sorry if I'm ruining it for the surprise. But the circle is when you walk in, you're faced with the circle. And the circle to me, was very daunting, but it was so important because it allowed for the breakdown of just barriers, right? So for me, one of my big barriers is being an introvert, and really having to contend with being in that open circle as an introvert and not have, just the little things to sort of make me feel a little bit more comfortable. I hated every minute of it the first few sessions, but it made a huge difference in how I engaged, not only how I engaged with others, but how I engaged with the material, the content, the discussion. And so I think that right there is one of the holistic things, because the amount of thought that went into that, right? That circle is so intentional. And it took me a little while to realize how intentional that circle was. I think the other thing, and Praz touched on this in sort of expressing how she coming in right after the election, is that, it wasn't just going into the session and saying, okay, let's go through the readings, let's, talk about trends in philanthropy and DEI. It was, we come in, we acknowledge one another, and we acknowledge what's going on in our lives. And so really starting by saying, what's on people's mind that might be distracting you from being here? And as you can imagine, there's all sorts of things that keep us from being fully present. And so again, the level of thought that went into just that aspect of it was very holistic. I felt like it was very holistic in terms of the activities, exercises, and things like that. I think another thing that was very thoughtful, but again, very uncomfortable for me as I was going through it, was the sort of degrees of freedom, right? And so we would be charged to do X assignment over time, but there'd be like these holes or seemingly holes of information. And so people would be like, well, what are we supposed to do it this way? Are we supposed to do it that way? And it again, for someone like me who's super structured, it was uncomfortable. But in the end, when I, put forth my presentation at the end, which was around, really thinking about how I can help my home institution evolve, I was grateful that, there were so many degrees of freedom, because it helped me, because in my everyday job, I create the structure, and so I limit my own degrees of freedom. And going through that process helped me identify that. So it actually helped me realize that I put too many structures around myself, which is creates more of a challenge for me, because I happen to be on a team that is growing quickly, both in people and content, portfolio, geographies. And so I can't have as much structure around myself and how I think about my center as I did 4 years ago, because it just doesn't make sense. And so those examples are, for me, some examples that really felt holistic. And it wasn't until I got through the end, or through a couple iterations, or at the very end of something, that I look back and realize, like, oh, that helped me do X. But in the moment, it was very uncomfortable, or I didn't understand, and I was just kind of like, what are we doing? So that's my experience, my experience of the program being holistic.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And I must say, like, I was getting all the feels just hearing you talk about the intentionality of the circle and the exercise around being present. And I think a lot of times when you walk into these settings, regardless of sort of where your comfort level is, there is a lot of intentionality that goes around building these experiences. And I selfishly say that as one who's designing, but I think often the recipients and those that are participating don't often see that in the beginning, and it may be until you're 3, 6, 7 months in, and all the dots are starting to connect, and you see how everything led to the next, and how so much connectivity was involved in designing this program. And I think that's truly what makes Pathways such a unique experience and unlike anything else that's out there in the field, because it is so uniquely curated for the people that are in the room. And I think that's a piece of the intentionality that kind of echoes what Praz was saying about just the diverse experiences and the people that are in those seats. All of those things don't just happen, and that, we're very calculated around that. So I appreciate your remarks there. Praz, do you have anything to add about just the intentionality or the holistic approach of this program?
Yeah, I share Letitia's fear of the circle, although it turned out to be a very powerful way that we bonded together and opened up to each other as a team. But yeah, we had so many supports from the Career Pathways folks. The pre-reads that we were asked to do, always really high quality. The videos we watched, the webinars, the TED Talks, the coaching we received. I had a coach assigned to me, and we chatted for like an hour once a month or so. And she was very helpful in just helping me process and work through things that were going on sort of personally as well as professionally, because some of this DEI stuff can get very personal. And then we just also had each other as kind of informal mentors, and the council staff as mentors as well. In terms of the programming, I think like one of the things that I really enjoyed was hearing from CEOs as guest speakers each of the sessions. But for me, the real highlight was definitely seeing the kind of capstone keystone presentations at the end of the program, where each participant would present their sort of their big project. And several other participants kind of described the DEI journeys at their place of work. And I kind of realized that so much of us share the same struggles, and that we're sort of all trying to be heard without being too vocal, and we're all kind of trying to make waves without being labeled a troublemaker. And we all felt this like sense of obligation to give back to like advance the DEI agendas of our employers. And one of the big like sort of aha moments for me during this program was that it's kind of an additional load that everyone on the Career Pathways program was like shouldering, sort of trying to work out like how do you walk this tightrope of influencing others to be better partners in DEI, even as you're trying to like navigate and make sense of the bureaucracy yourself. And I think like everyone on Career Pathways kind of shouldered that additional load with enthusiasm, and it was super energizing for me. And it could have been really tiring, but it was always uplifting, and it always felt like a safe space. And we really took time to examine our own privilege and the privilege conferred upon us, as employees who represent philanthropic donors, the positive aspects, the challenges. But like the whole time, as Leticia was saying, and you just hit on this too, Karan, like the whole time the Career Pathways team was like alongside us, trying to understand what was landing well, what was working for us, what wasn't working, and making all of these changes in the moment to kind of improve the quality of the program. And I really appreciated that.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. I want to just touch on one thing you mentioned, which was about the executive coaching. And I think, I'm sure that probably would have come up at some point in our conversation as well. I would say we really pride ourselves in that element of this program, and it sets it apart from what you might find in some other programs that are out in the market or even in the sector, perhaps, is that the coaching, which each person, as you mentioned, in the cohort is paired with an executive coach that they have with them through the duration of the program. And so everything that is happening in the in-person learning sessions, much of that is being supplemented through a lot of the assignments and the readings and the conversations that you're having outside of the learning sessions, but also really being supported through the coaching experience. And the unique thing I like about the coaches that we use for Career Pathways is they're all so very seasoned and have such great, very unique experiences amongst themselves. And I've learned from many people in the program is that they use the coaching obviously to support what's happening in Pathways, but really it's just a trusted confidant and someone that they can use as a sounding board and a thought partner that can really help them through whatever challenges or issues that they may be facing in their own institutions, and having that safe space that's removed from the organization is really powerful and valuable for them. In fact, many of the cohorts previously that have gone through the program have stayed in touch with their coaches, and many of them continue to retain the coaching as well. It's definitely one of the things that we've heard. I've heard it referred to as the secret sauce of this program, is that the element of the executive coaching really sets it apart. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And also, I just wanted to echo your point about hearing from CEOs. I think that's been a really valuable component of this program, is bringing in diverse leaders, particularly those at the helm of philanthropic institutions and organizations across the sector, especially when they come into a room and there are people that look like them. And so that's one of the things that we're often very careful and intentional about in Pathways, is identifying those leaders, and giving them an opportunity to share their leadership journey, what their plight has been, and just the feedback. And I think how that has been so valuable for those in the circle and those in the room has been incredible. So I appreciate that. One of the things I'd like to talk about, because both of you already talked about some of what are those aha moments, but I wonder, if you could talk about how Pathways directly influenced your leadership or your personal career trajectory. I'd love to hear more, considering you both just came out of the program just almost a year now, what has that journey been like post Pathways? Latif.
Sure. So I think, my experience, and I touched on this a little bit, it's definitely changed how I think about myself as a leader on my team. So as I mentioned, one of the things I was having trouble with is just that transition from managing to leading. And what it's done is it's really helped me understand the nuances of being a leader, and how to really, and also how to take some of what I learned in Pathways and sprinkle that into my team so that they can be better managers and leaders in some cases. So that's been really helpful in a number of ways, because it's being able to understand those distinctions has helped me structure my time a lot better. And so I'm not only just more efficient, but my role, I've been able to elevate my role. So just as an example, I don't spend quite as much time, with, every person on my team. But I have more time to spend and think about how to collaborate both internally within my institution as well as externally, which is critical to our evolution as a center. So that's really helped. But it's taken some time. And so, it's not like you walk out of Pathways, with your shiny new tools in your toolbox and you're like, okay. It takes time to really implement them. I think the other thing that it's really helped me do is, really, to be honest, to be comfortable with the thought of leaving. So I can wholeheartedly say I love my job. I love where I am. I love my team. I got to build something. I get to continue to build it. But as you can imagine, we always talk about it as we're building a plane as we're flying it, and while that is super cool, it is super stressful. And so because I've been there since almost the beginning and have helped build it, I have this deep attachment to my center. And sometimes that would get into the way of me thinking about other opportunities. But Pathways has really helped me lead myself, if you will, to be okay and comfortable with at least acknowledging opportunities, and understand sort of what's my criteria for that, right? And so we would always talk about, don't run away from something, run towards something. But also don't pass up opportunities that are unfamiliar to you just because they are unfamiliar to you, because they could be the most fantastic things in the world. So those are the ways that it's really helped me evolve, in the context of how I lead my team, how I teach my team to be better managers and leaders so that we're stronger through the ranks. And just, giving myself permission to say, yes, this is your thing and you love your thing and there's nothing wrong with that, but don't limit yourself. Always have your eyes open for new opportunities. And that's actually changed how I think about my portfolio. So just to give you an example, prior to Career Pathways, one of the things that I wasn't getting out of my position, and I'll admit it's only recently changed, is I wasn't really out doing speaking engagements. And I actually really like to speak. And so my executive visibility was really low. And pathways help me see that it's not just about you need to raise your hand and say, I want to do this thing because, I do it well. But it was also, it helps me diversify, what I'm thinking about day to day, how I'm thinking about the work day to day. But it's also how, your visibility is how you get your next gig, right? It's how you meet people and you talk to people, and 5, 10, however many years down the road, some person has some opportunity that they think you'd be perfect for. And maybe you are, and maybe you aren't. But if no one knows that you're out there and you're just sort of toiling away behind the scenes, building this awesome thing, then no one really knows that people know you exist, but what does that really mean in terms of people understanding what you do and how you do it. So those are the key things that have really changed how I lead my team and lead myself.
That was great. I love how you framed that at the end, and so important for us to acknowledge and own those things as leaders of color, and certainly this program helped to do that. Would you have anything to add there, Praz, about how this program influenced your career or your leadership journey?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I think one of the big takeaways, I completely agree with Letice when she says you don't sort of walk away and you immediately have all of these tools and you're ready to get down to action. But one of the sort of immediate takeaways for me was like right after the program ended and I was back at the office without the active support of the Career Pathways team, and I just realized that I had moved so much in my thinking about DEI and really moved to this very different place relative to some of my peers. And that kind of prompted me to think really hard about like, okay, what role can I play in the transformation of this team without pushing too hard and without damaging the trust that exists? And so in some ways, I've kind of learned to be more introspective now and really focus on the work that is within my control, and just kind of hoping and trusting that the team will eventually meet me where I am. And it's kind of agonizing to watch the baby steps that are slowly being made towards DEI in the field of philanthropy. But like, I guess a big takeaway for me is that like every one of us individually and each organization kind of makes this journey towards DEI really at our own pace. So that was a big takeaway right after the program. And then just in terms of how the program influenced my career, it really kind of reinforced for me the power and the value of a network to achieve change, and the sort of shared experiences and frustrations and the joys that we, the celebrations and the commiserations together, and all of that felt like, for me, it felt like my learning trajectory was super accelerated just by being exposed to all of the experience of the other participants. And I'm definitely taking that forward in my career. The way the K-12 team at the Gates Foundation is thinking about funding right now is around networking schools together so that they're learning from each other in a way that kind of feels empowering. And that all feels really good to me and really natural. And we're talking much more about race-based achievement gaps in the USA for the first time. But like, even as we're sort of talking about how we close these race-based achievement gaps, I know that like our individual grants and our dollars also send a message to the field about whose work is important. And we also know that representation matters. And so I'm doing what I can to support grants and grant-making processes that fund these networks of schools in the K-12 system, but trying to do that in a way that is fair and transparent and making sure that as many people of color as possible have a shot at getting funding, right? And so the Gates Foundation is working hard to find ways to partner with minority-led organizations, because we do think that is so important. It's so important that our grantees have these lived experiences that kind of bring them closer to the Black and Latino and low-income students that we want them to reach. But, you know, I also know, and this is partly because of the experience that I had with Career Pathways, that people of color have not historically had a seat at the funders table, right? And so I spend a lot of time now thinking about how can we get face time with those kinds of grantees. And so while I was participating in the Career Pathways program, we actually opened and we issued like an open RFI to hear from the field, and we were just like inundated with ideas. And we met a ton of like new potential partners, and now we're selecting grantees through these open application processes that anyone can enter. And so I hope that at some level I'm helping to disrupt this like dynamic of power that has worked against people of color trying to attract the attention of big funders over the years. And then just like at a really personal level, I think in my own career, I'm just kind of constantly still kind of looking for those allies and those of like the positive deviants that I can learn from. I'm trying to attend a few conferences this year with a view to expanding my horizons. And one of them was an invitation from a fellow Career Pathways alumni who wanted me to come and attend a convening with some Native Americans, which is not something that I would usually have had the opportunity to do. So I'm just kind of still benefiting from all of this as my work's moving forward now. And this sort of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, it's never finished. And I just always feel like I can learn more. And I attribute a lot of that mindset around growth and development to my experience with Career Pathways.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate your response. That was incredible what you've shared, and was just reaffirming, I think, for those of us that work on this side of the program, and just really reaffirms why we're doing what we do as it relates to Pathways, and definitely just resonated so well with me. I wonder if you could both talk about, and we've sort of talked about this, I think, organically throughout our conversation already, but what were the things that you enjoyed the most, or were there perhaps elements of this program that you haven't mentioned outside of the peer networking or the coaching? You know, were there any other things that, or aspects that you truly appreciated from your standpoint as a participant? Praz, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I can jump in there first. And I'm glad that you're feeling validated, Karan, because like you guys worked super hard and we had a great experience because of you. And so as I was kind of just reflecting on your question, I feel like it was such a high quality experience because consistently you guys as facilitators were just being really thoughtful about the sessions, and you were facilitating them really well. The sort of progression of sessions was always clear and it was logical, and we weren't like over facilitated. So we also got like some downtime to have dinner with other people who were on the program, or to call home because we were all away from our families for a few days for these sessions as well. And I just felt like you were very attentive to our emotional well-being and our mental health, because a lot of this work is pretty heavy and it can take you to a dark place, and you just all kind of helped us to facilitate. You sort of facilitated our well-being really well during those sessions. And you also took super good care of us, and you fed us great food, and you put us up in wonderful hotels. And all of this meant that like we could really focus on our own leadership and the materials and the learning without any kind of distraction. And that was so rare and it's so precious that it was one of the most valuable aspects of the Career Pathways experience for me. So thank you for that, Karan.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. What about you, Latif?
Hands down, I completely echo what Praz just said. You know, you guys really did take such, intentional and thoughtful care of us. And I'm glad, Praz, that you mentioned the mental health component, because the DEI content is heavy. Philanthropy in itself is heavy, but also doing that, again, that really deep introspective work is heavy. And so, just really giving us the space, the safe space to have those conversations, but also the lifeline to pull us back up when we got deep down and say, but this is why we're here. We're here to change it. And again, I think the thing that I enjoyed in addition to that the most was just the building a new family. And from day one, you guys encouraging us to use one another and bond, like not just bond with one another, but use one another for support and to have these frank conversations. And I think, now that we are all back, in our separate corners of the world, we're not disconnected. So for me personally, um, I am, running, 1,000 miles per minute, as I'm sure we all are, but I still don't feel disconnected from my cohort. I know that if I need something, they are an email or a phone call away. And so I think that's my favorite part. And again, I think it also is rooted in me being an introvert. Um, and so not really expecting to get such a full energy tank from other people. So for me, that's a huge thing.
That's great. Thank you for that as well. That's a good segue into my next question, which is really around, as you think about other leaders out there in the field and across the sector that may be thinking about career pathways. They're probably listening and watching this webinar right now and trying to figure out, is this the program for them, and really trying to determine whether it's the best fit. Can you talk about, would you recommend this program to a fellow philanthropic leader, perhaps, and why would you recommend it to them, and what would you say to someone that's still on the fence about whether or not they should apply to Pathways? Latif?
Yes, wholeheartedly, I would recommend this to a philanthropic leader. Um, I think it's really, it's important for anyone considering um, this program to really think about, to do the work up front to understand where they are, right? You don't have to have the, ultra HD 4-dimensional picture of where you are in your career trajectory, but you need to take a breath to figure out where you are and have some semblance of what you might want to get out of this. It may not be the same thing that you actually get out of it. For me, it wasn't, but I had a semblance of it. And so, I think that's really important to think about when you go into it. Um, if for someone who's still on the fence about it, um, I'd say get off the fence. I mean, I don't. It's very simple. It's very clear. Get off the fence. I mean, this is as you mentioned, Karan, and I know you're one of the engineers of the program, but it, there isn't another program like this, and so just to completely validate that this is truly unique. It's truly a very special um, something very special to be involved in. And as philanthropic leaders, at least from my perspective, I think you know we're not ever going to be well versed in everything, right? But being in the room, well, for the program, there were lots of different pockets of content that we touched on. But having the 17, 20 plus people in the room that all have different perspectives, that provides such a wide field of vision across philanthropy that you don't get anywhere else. And I think that that's the critical component of what this program brings, that you get to learn so much through the individual people in the program about philanthropy that you can read 100 books and 1,000 articles and you still wouldn't get the same perspectives and insights that are really important to as you continue to rise in the leadership ranks in philanthropy.
Exactly. Thank you so much. What about you, Praz? Any thoughts on what you might say to someone that might be out there thinking about applying to Pathways, and why, or perhaps even why not, depending on what they're looking for?
Yeah, I think Latif did a great job on the why. And so I won't sort of reiterate all the benefits for individuals and their careers. On the why not, I don't know if this program would suit someone who is very laser focused on their own career trajectory and is not as interested in the career trajectories and the experiences of other people of color. Those two things are deeply connected to each other. And I was surprised coming into the cohort about how much time we spent talking about DEI collectively beyond just our own individual experience and our individual career trajectories. And I think it made me a much better person for that experience. But if you are not interested in that, if you really are just looking for some professional development for yourself as a leader in philanthropy, then I would say maybe this isn't the right program for you. I don't know. What do you think of that, Karan?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I will chime in here before you like to, Latice. I think it's a great point. Career Pathways is not for everyone. I think you guys have painted a very good picture to give some indication about what the program is about, certainly from a high level based on your own unique experiences. But I think I would say that you come into this program with a very different perspective and a different orientation than perhaps everyone would. And so I agree, if you're solely focused on yourself and not really thinking about it holistically, in a sense, it may not be the best experience, or it could be. I think I've seen many people over the years who've gone into this program with one expectation and really have been able to, pivot and do somewhat of a turn based on the experience that other people around them were having. I think a lot of the conversations that happen in the room, and then just a lot of digging deeper with the coaching can also help that as well. So it is a very unique experience that may not be for everyone. And I will say, if you're just looking for a traditional kind of run-of-the-mill leadership development program, that isn't really Career Pathways. I think there are plenty of programs out there where you can get that leadership training at a very surface level, and that's just not Pathways.
Yeah, totally agree.
Great. Did you have anything to add there, Latice?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to quickly add, because as Paz was talking, and she was talking about DEI, it raised another point for me. So coming into the program, so my institution, DEI is not, or at least my center, we're doing okay in that front. You're never doing like 100%, but that wasn't it wasn't something that was always on the forefront of my mind. And so for me, I think coming in, I was thinking not solely about just my own career, because I wanted to think about how can I help my team and make sure they evolve. But DEI was something that was like, okay, yes, we should definitely be talking about this. I should be aware. As we went through it, it gave me additional insights about sort of what the struggle is, particularly in the context of weighing it against your privilege working in philanthropy, which is something I hadn't really thought about, not to that degree. But what it really did for me is it not only like sort of heightened my awareness to say like, okay, yes, this isn't an issue for you right now in your environment, but it could be at any moment. And down the line, a few months, probably about 6 months after the conclusion of the Pathways program, when the Me Too movement had started, it's actually prompted me to have a conversation with my executive director to say, hey, I think we need to say something about this. And not because we were having a problem within our institution or even our center, but it prompted me to be proactive and say, and to have a conversation with my executive director and say, hey, we need to make sure that people feel empowered so that if something is happening that is making them feel less than or uncomfortable by anyone that we interact with internally or externally, they need to feel empowered to say that. And I bring this up because particularly in philanthropy, when you're working at certain levels, you're dealing with very powerful people. And I actually shared with her, to put it in context, that I actually had a Me Too movement, which at the time I did not think was a Me Too moment because I just felt like I handled it. It's fine. It wasn't appropriate, but I got it. But when I explained to her what that moment was, she was horrified. And she said, well, why didn't you? And I said, because I got it. But it made me, in that moment, my thinking also evolved to say, yes, but what about the junior analysts who wouldn't be as confident, about that particular person of power, you know, touching you inappropriately because they know that person is friends with the chairman of the board or whomever. And so pathways, it changed it, like it just gave me a whole different perspective to be proactive in a way that I don't think I had thought about before. And I think it made a real difference in my team because they have a different sense of themselves as they're navigating these sometimes very complex relationships with, high net worths and ultra high net worths, and CEOs, et cetera. So I just wanted to add that there, that again, that's not something that I would have ever going into it, connected those dots together. But it definitely, in that particular moment, in that conversation with my executive director, that was a direct, drawback to what I learned and experienced in pathways around our DEI conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Latice. So before we go into any of the process, logistical pieces of pathways for the folks that are watching today, any lingering comments, any things that either of you wanted to share that we haven't quite touched on? I just want to give you the opportunity to do so.
Nothing from me.
I agree. I think we've covered a lot.
Awesome. Well, I think I've just spent a few seconds just talking through the eligibility for those of you that are still interested and want to learn more and perhaps apply to the Pathways program. Our eligibility requirements are listed on the website. I've highlighted some of them here, but obviously being an employee of a grant-making institution, a foundation, or a philanthropic organization. As I mentioned earlier, this program is really targeted for mid to senior level professionals and diverse leaders that have those experiences. Obviously looking for folks that have a very strong interest in the senior and executive level of roles in philanthropy. And one of the biggest points I wanted to just note here is having the endorsement and the support of your home institution. I think for those of you that have gone in and seen the application, this is one of the requirements in there. And I think it really goes without saying because of the investment of the time and the energy and the effort that you as a leader are putting into this program. And so having an institution or an organization that supports you in doing that, that recognizes the importance of this program, and that just underscores completely, when you're taking time away to be on site at the learning sessions, and really spending the time and the effort to dig into this experience, it's important to have the support of those that you work with. And then ultimately, we want to make sure that each of you are just fully, investing of your own time and energy and not feeling that sort of being spread too thin or feeling like you're having to make choices and choose between what the organization's, what their desires might be and what your own personal leadership desires might be. So it's really important for folks who want to join Pathways to understand the investment, for the organization that they come from to understand the investment, so that we're all aligned in that. So our application process is currently open, so please go on to cof.org. We have many more other questions, FAQs, and things on there. And I'll just highlight a couple of those here. I think we've sort of talked through all of these things, so they don't require much on my part, but it's a little bit dissimilar or similar to a fellowship program, whereas fellowship programs are typically, part-time or full-time career experience away from the employer. That's not Pathways. You're obviously still going to maintain your current employment and really foster a close linkage with your home institution, with your CEO and any other senior leaders, I should say, which is a really important extension of the learning experience. We have really great instructors and trainers and presenters, also known as facilitators, who are philanthropic executives and thought leaders from inside and outside of philanthropy. And we're really fortunate to have had a lot of great retention with our facilitators and the team. And so we have folks that are familiar with the program, that have been working with the program for many years, and have seen this experience over the years and have been able to evolve along with it. The program, as we mentioned before, is for 1 year, and so we kick off in January of 2019 and we'll conclude at the end of 2019, and that's broken out into learning sessions and a lot of things that happen when we're not face-to-face, and you can get a better sense of that in terms of the structure of the program on the website. In terms of the selection process, there's the application. We have a group of stakeholders and peer reviewers that are vetting and reviewing applications and providing recommendations. And there's more about the process online as well. Ultimately, we see this as an opportunity for not only an individual leader to grow, but for the organization to grow. I think Latisse and Praz have sort of nailed that very well in our conversation today about how this impacted them, but also really how it also impacted and influenced their organizations, their teams, and the people ultimately that they work with the most. And so, I think there's a lot of incentives. Your home institution is going to benefit from your participation through your increased effectiveness, your expanded networks. They've both talked about that, and frankly, your foundation or organization's recognition as a leader in the field. And so we look for opportunities to invite the home institutions to take a role in identifying those leadership opportunities for you during the program. But your home institution really is a vital and integral component of the program. Again, supporting you as an individual, but also as an example of the foundation or the organization investing in philanthropic leadership. So there's plenty more FAQs on the website. Please go to cof.org/career pathways, and you can learn more there. As I said before, the application process is open now, so please go and apply. We have a deadline of October 15, so you still have a few more weeks to get your applications in, and we look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions, you can reach us. Our email and contact information is on cof.org. Otherwise, we look forward to getting to know all of you through your applications of the program. With that, I would like to thank our guests today, Latisse Briggs and Praz Ranawira, who joined us, and I'm so grateful for your taking the time out to share your experiences. And I know that our listeners and that are joined with us today have greatly appreciated your candor and your transparency in what you've shared. So thank you again to both of you.
Thank you for the
You're
opportunity,
welcome.
Karan.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.